Yes, we have the last one.
Okay. Professor Msila says there's a second round coming, which means that I must be short in my answers, otherwise there won't be time. Muzi, with regard to your request about the board, agreed. They contact me, I'm happy to serve on the board. On the matter of how the university is treating with the issue of the important issue of people with disability, fortunately, Vice Chancellor is sitting next to me there. She must answer that question. It's an important question, I agree. It needs her to answer it. When we were in government, we thought this was one of the matters which needed really close attention. We had resisted the idea of the formation of a ministry dealing with women, youth, people with disability. And the reason we're resisting the idea of a ministry, we're saying that those issues belong to the President of the Republic, not particular ministers. So right at the top, because it's a cross-cutting issue, it must impact on every element of government. So you can't allocate it to a ministry. That's the position we took. And as a result, the government had, I don't know what the situation is now, government had a very comprehensive policy on how to deal with the disability issue. So that indeed, even I remember that the World Bank poached one of our senior officials to deal with the disability issue in Washington. So I'm sure there was a setting within which our universities could deal with the matter of disability. What UNISA is doing particularly about this matter, I really don't know. But the Vice Chancellor, fortunately, is here. She can answer that question. With regard to the Congo, as I was indicating, we brought the Congolese together to say, let's talk about the future of the Congo. And indeed they came, and they, as I say, in all the elements that came, and we discussed that, and they came to a unanimous view as to what they thought needed to be done. The issue that is being raised, like for instance about the people who committed genocide in Rwanda in 1994, and then went into the Eastern Congo, who now became what is called the FDLR. The question that is being raised is important. What are we doing about those people? In 2001, 2002, after we had concluded the negotiations among the Congolese had concluded the negotiations among themselves in what was called Sun City, it was clear to us that there was another element that needed to be addressed, which was the question of the relations particularly between Rwanda and the DRC. As a consequence of which, we convened a process between the two governments to look at the matter of the relations between the two of them, which would include this matter of the people who had fled from Rwanda into the Eastern Congo. As a consequence of which, there was an agreement signed between the DRC and Rwanda, signed by both presidents, Joseph Kabila and Paul Kagame. I recall that even Kofi Annan, who was Secretary General of the UN, insisted that he wanted to be one of the observers to that agreement. So that agreement is signed by President Kagame, President Joseph Kabila. Witnesses, Kofi Annan, myself. And part of that, so the Americans are saying that the agreement that was signed now in Washington between the two countries by the foreign ministers of the two countries is the first such agreement. That's not correct. First agreement was signed here in Pretoria, 2002, signed by the presidents. One of the clauses in that agreement, I'm sure it appears again in this agreement in the United States, was that it would be important for the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo to disarm the FDLR. If they want to stay in the Congo, to disarm them, they can stay as refugees. Otherwise, to resist, to assist in the process of their return to Rwanda as ordinary civilians, not armed groups. Attached to that was then the withdrawal of the Rwandan troops that were in the Congo because of the presence of the FDLR. I'm sure if you look at the agreement that was signed in Washington now, it will say the same thing. That agreement didn't work, collapsed. The reason it collapsed is because the government of the Congo did not have the capacity to disarm the FDLR. They could not implement the agreement. So I'm saying that agreement collapsed. I don't know how the situation has changed now, because I'm quite sure the agreement in the United States will have the same provision. It's the responsibility of the government of the Congo not to allow foreigners to form armies on the territory of the Congo. And therefore, this FDLR must be disarmed, and indeed can go back home to Rwanda, but the government of Rwanda must make sure it accepts these Rwandan citizens. Whether that will actually happen at now, I don't know. So that is how we're dealing with the matter of the FDLR. We couldn't insert them into a meeting where the Congolese are meeting, deciding the future of the Congo among themselves. They're not Congolese. These are Rwandans. And so I'm saying we're dealing with them in a different way, within the context of a bilateral agreement between the governments of the Congo and Rwanda. And fortunately, you've had a new agreement between the governments of Rwanda and the Congo. It has a provision for how to deal with the FDLR. So the matter is not being ignored, but it's being dealt with in that particular context. Whether the government of the Congo would have the capacity to disarm the FDLR now, as was written in that agreement between President Joseph Kabila and President Kagame, whether they have that capacity now, I don't know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, I don't know. But I think that's the only way to deal with the problem of the FDLR. It must be on the basis of a condition of a peace agreement between the two countries. And then the two countries must act together to make sure that there's no security threat to Rwanda based on an armed group that is in the Congo, and vice versa. There must be no threat to the security of the DRC on the basis of some armed group that might be in Rwanda. I think that's the only way to deal with this issue. And fortunately, and hopefully, the agreement that's been signed in the US now would attend to that matter, hopefully, of the FDLR, the Rwandan refugees in the Congo. I'm talking about the Rwandan refugees because we've really never engaged the issue of Ugandan refugees in the Congo, because the problematic group was this FDLR. We've had a very our relationship, I'm now talking as a liberation movement, our relationship with Iran starts after the overthrow of the Shah of Iran. The government of Iran at the time of the Shah had very good relations with the apartheid regime. When it was overthrown, that's when we started our own relations with Iran, which have continued ever since. At the time that the issue of the nuclear question as it relates to Iran, at that time that it arose very sharp and became a big issue, Security Council and all that, for some of that time, South Africa was the chair of the non-aligned movement. So we dealt with the government of Iran as the chair of the non-aligned movement. Because the positions that the non-aligned movement were taking was this, that the non-aligned movement is a very active supporter of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And therefore, the non-aligned movement would be opposed to any proliferation of nuclear weapons if it occurred in Iran. That's the position we took. And so we had very active engagement with the government of Iran on this matter. And the government of Iran continues to insist with us that there was actual policy that Iran must not have nuclear weapons. And therefore the accusation that was being made at the time, they consistently denied it, that there were no nuclear weapons in Iran. As I say, we worked with them very closely at the time. I remember that there was a leading Iranian who became president of Iran, Mr. Rouhani. At the time that he was leading the negotiations on this issue, he came to us. We had a number of meetings with him. I'm saying later he became the president of Iran. During that time, maybe this is the first time I am saying this, during this time, we are chair of the non-aligned movement. I then talked to the British Prime Minister and said, you know, Prime Minister, we are regularly in contact with the Iranians on this matter, and they assured us that there are no nuclear weapons. Can you give me one or two facts which show that in fact there is work being done in Iran towards the manufacture of nuclear weapons? Just a couple of facts, because then it would empower me as a chairperson of the non-aligned movement to confront the Iranians that you're not telling me the truth. So the British Prime Minister agreed. As a result, a delegation came from the British Intelligence Service, the MI6. They came here. So I met them. We raised the same issue with the government of Israel. And the delegation of Mossad came here, and we met them. We raised the same question with the US government, and the delegation of the CIA came, and they were met by the then Minister of Intelligence, Ronnie Castrens. And all of them, these intelligence agencies, they made their presentations. The reason our countries are saying Iran is busy with nuclear weapons are the following. In all instances, what our response was, what you are actually arguing is 1 + 1 is 5. There was nothing of substance that they had. It was deductions. If this and that, therefore the other. I'm saying that's why we say 1 + 1 = 5. I'm saying that was the actuality, and at that point of time, that it seemed to us that the government of Iran was quite being very truthful when they say there's no nuclear weapons. And indeed, these intelligence agencies, where they came to see us, could not give us information of an alternative kind. I do not know whether the situation in Iran with regard to nuclear weapons has changed. I'm saying during the time we're in government, historically that was a position. I know the government of Iran continues to insist on that issue. Whether that's changed or not, I don't know. The issues of the involvement of MTN, for instance, in Iran, was entirely a matter between the company and Iran. The Iranians put out a tender for mobile telephony. MTN won that contract. I remember there was strong opposition. Another competitor there was a Turkish company. But that was entirely a commercial thing. So I don't see the reason why the matter of the relations between South Africa and Iran should offend anybody. These are ordinary, normal bilateral relations between South Africa and Iran. There's nothing exceptional about them. And indeed, I don't know what the chief of the National Defense Force said when he was in Tehran recently. I'm sure that would not have created new policy towards Iran. So as I say, I don't know what it is that would be offensive to anybody, as a consequence of which there would be a confrontation between us and any other country about the issue of our relations with Iran. There's nothing exceptional about those relations. The U.S. historically, as everybody, students at the school know, the U.S. has had what has been called the Monroe Doctrine for centuries, which was that part of the world is the exclusive sphere of influence by the United States, Latin America and so on. And I'm afraid, I think that attitude persists. And so when Cuban Revolution succeeded in 1959, Fidel Castro would say, when we took power in 1959, we were pink in our politics. We were pink, like the shirt I'm wearing. I think it's pink. And he says, what turned us red was the response of the United States towards Cuba. It was the attitude that the United States government took at that time, which was to say, in our sphere of influence in terms of the Monroe Doctrine, you cannot have policies of which the United States government disapproves. And therefore took certain actions against Cuba. I think you're having a similar phenomenon with regard to Venezuela. Because I wouldn't imagine that Venezuela is a threat to the United States. I think you can't imagine that Venezuela becoming a threat to the U.S. such that the U.S. must destroy troops to come and attack Venezuela. Doesn't make sense to me. But I think it's probably influenced by this continuing doctrine that this part of the world is our sphere of influence, and therefore we will not allow that any government should pursue policies with which we disagree. I would hope that it's a matter that can be resolved, because the countries of Latin America, like the countries of Africa, really surely should be free to decide what their destiny is, without anybody dictating to them that you are in my sphere of influence, therefore do the following. I do not know whether, I cannot answer the question whether the US knew what Israel was going to do relative to this recent attack in Doha. I don't know that. And I don't want to guess at it. But clearly, I do not think we would approve. We have a situation here where there are negotiations going on involving Hamas, the Israeli government, government of Qatar, government of Egypt, government of the United States, all of them involved. Let's find a way of solving these problems. Peace, release of hostages, release of political prisoners, and all of that. And in the middle of those negotiations, you then take action to decapitate one of the negotiators, which was Hamas. Can't be right. You need a Hamas which has got capacity to engage its issues and come to a resolution. You don't need a decapitated Hamas. It's not going to solve the problem. So I'm just saying that this attack that took place now in Doha by Israel, I don't think it contributed anything to the resolution of the conflict that is going on there. Whether the Americans knew about that attack or not, I really don't know. As I was trying to indicate earlier, our country, the rest of our continent, and I think everybody else, has got to find a way of intervening in the process of the formation of this new world order, in good measure influenced by what the Trump administration is doing. Our government has taken a position that I think is correct, to say we don't want a war, a fight with the Americans. We want to engage them so that let us find a solution. For instance, answer the question, why these tariffs? Let's find a solution to that particular matter. I think the government has taken a position with regard to come to that, and I do hope the continuing engagement between our government and the United States will resolve this matter. We don't want, our government, I'm saying, has taken a correct position in saying we don't want a confrontation with the United States. But also correct for the government here to say, but we insist on our independence and our capacity as a country to determine for ourselves what is good for South Africa. It's also correct to insist on that. And hopefully the engagement, we continuing engagement with the US government about the tariffs and whatever else will produce the necessary outcome. The issue of African alignment. That's an agreed position of the African continent. This issue where the African continent talks about African unity, it's exactly that point. That we need to come to a stage where we have the kind of alignment that we're talking about, whether it's the laws in education, in health, or whatever. During the 50th anniversary, the year of the 50th anniversary of the independence of Ghana, which must have been 2007, something like that. There was a summit of the African Union which took place in Accra. It discussed this issue of African unity. When we say Africa must unite, practically what are the steps that must be taken? There was a long discussion about this thing among very well attended heads of government, heads of state. And the big conflict was, how do you achieve this alignment, this unity? Is it top down or bottom up?